So I think it'd be useful for the students to know a little bit more just about the details of the process, maybe both in the secular context and in these religious contexts, how the slaughter works and what the differences are.
Yeah. In the simplest terms, people speak about stunned and unstunned slaughter. And stunned slaughter is required by law except for religious slaughter. There is usually some kind of ruling related to religious slaughter that separates it from the normal procedures. And the normal procedures are to stun the animal, you place what's called a captive bolt gun on the skull, and you either crack the skull, which is called non-penetrating, or you actually crack the skull, and that's called penetrating. So in both cases, the animal becomes unconscious immediately and probably also becomes insensible. And just to, as I'll be wanting to use those two terms, unconscious means that you no longer feel pain. It's what you do when you're put out for surgery. You become unconscious, but things are happening and your body is functioning. So you are certainly not dead. Right. Insensible means the loss of all the reflexes that we can measure, and those are measured in the head. So when you see animals kicking around and things like that in some of the activist movies, that's irrelevant. All the important things are happening in the head. So it's the loss of the eye reflex. If you poke the eye and the animal doesn't respond, that's the last reflex. The other thing when you're looking at animals to see if they are insensible is their tongue just drops out. So those are the important signs. And that happens fairly quickly with stunning with the captive bolt and both penetrating and non-penetrating.
Can I just ask really quick? So we went to this Cargill plant last year and they let us see the process, and we did see what you're describing, the animals moving and kicking and so forth. What you're saying is that that's not signals coming from the brain anymore. It's more just the muscles working themselves out or twitching.
And it's involuntary types of activity.
So the brain is just flatlined at that point.
If they have been properly stunned.
Right. Okay.
Right. And there is then the second form of stunning is putting two electrodes either head to head, which then will make the animal unconscious but not insensible, or head to back. And with the right currents, and there's a lot of argument between America and Europe and the scientists on what are the right currents, you can get both unconsciousness and insensibility, the loss of the reflexes with that. So there's stun to stun, which is head to head, and then there's stun to kill. And that's a point that becomes important as the Muslim community tries to sort out what it does and doesn't accept in modern slaughter. So there are disagreements there. The third is use of gas. And the gas, again, generally also has a phase, and that's been part of the lack of willingness to use it in America, where there's the animals, when you monitor them very closely, actually show us a short period of struggle. We call it aversion to the gas. They realize they're being gassed. You can avoid it with some systems, but they're very expensive. The latest version of gas is sort of no gas, which is vacuum. So there is some activities on doing vacuum killing of chickens. The advantage of that is with gas is you put them in while they're still in their crates. They're 20 or 30 birds at a time. You put them into this container and either gas them or pull vacuum, and then they're all either insensible, unconscious, or unconscious and insensible, and then you hang them up much more easily because they're no longer a live animal. Traditionally in this country, poultry is hung as a live animal, electric after it's been hung on the shackle line by its 2 feet, electrocuted, and then a rotating knife like a deli knife cuts the throat. Those are all the different forms of secular slaughter, all categorized as stun slaughter, but again, much more complicated, not as pleasant to think about when you get the description as opposed to stunned, which feels very good. So that's an issue. And again, all of these techniques have failure rates. And that becomes an important issue if you're the animal that fails. And the failure rate that's accepted as the modern standard is 5%. Now, most of our plants good plants can do better. Now, segueing over to...
Well, let me just ask, so the 5% is on the first try, you have to get 95% of the animals to go insensible. Let's say if we're doing...
Insensible or unconscious.
And then, but that would, so what would happen if you're one of the 5%? It just means you get a second bolt? Is that the idea?
Yeah, but you're freaked out by that.
And you're freaked out for at least...
I mean, that is a very unpleasant thing to have sort of a half stun. Again, sometimes it's a total miss, there may be, and that would still count, but most of the cases the animal then is pretty freaked out.
Okay, but it's not that these animals are then like butchered alive or something like that? No, okay.
We have generally been able to make sure that sort of thing doesn't happen.
Okay, because I think that's part of the narrative in some of the critics' story, that a lot of these animals end up being hung up there and they're still sensible and they're being sliced open and things.
Well, again, in some of these situations, you will get unconsciousness, but you haven't necessarily gotten insensibility. And our Western morality is that you do not start any processing until the animal is insensible. That is a moral judgment, actually. In theory, one could say, if the animal's unconscious, you could do this.
And is it just so the end of the story, so it's mostly cows who get the stun, the actual bolt, and then pigs typically get the electrocution, is that right? And then chickens get the gas, is that mostly how it's working? No.
No. Cattle, yes, most of them are stunned, but you will use, some folks will use the electrical stunning. You will not see very much gas. It's a little tricky with a large animal. Pigs are mostly either electrical or gas. They are large conveyors, and again, the trick with those is to not try to fill too many pigs in, and you have to get your gas in and out very quickly and do it correctly. So pigs will be done both ways. Small animals are generally a mix of electrical and stunned. Chicken in this country, I believe there may be one person using the vacuum system. All of our animals are live shackled, electrocuted, and then the rotating knife. Europe is moving more and more to gas. But our people, including Dr. Grandin, do not seem convinced that, in fact, that is superior.